Okay, for this remaining discussion of two-dimensional design principles, I'm going to talk about contrast, opposition, variety, movement, and the use of lines. Okay, this one will be relatively short. So let me get this part started. Okay. So here we have a still from Eli, from a scene in which Eli is talking to Margot on the phone after he's just read a scathing review of his book. And you know, Wes Anderson is sort of merciless when it comes to Eli's book, right? Eli reads a little bit of oh, I'm so sorry, you guys. Eli reads a little bit of his book at a book reading. And it's terrible, right? It's filled with all these thick words that are just like impossible to pronounce. It's this terrible book that you know is reviewed really harshly. And Eli is here on the phone with Margot. Margot is his lover, but she doesn't really like him that much, you know, and he's using her. So they don't have a harmonious relationship in any sort of sense of consideration. And Eli right now, I can't remember exactly what he's saying, but he's saying something like, you know, what do you mean that I'm not exactly a genius, or I'm not especially a genius? You know, what does that mean, right? He's saying something like that. Look at the visual architectural elements that surround Eli right now. Okay, Eli is kind of in the middle, he's kind of centered, but next to him, there's so much complexity, there's so much variety in the design of this composition. Okay, we have these stairs, these are repeated horizontal lines moving vertically. Okay, we have the lines of the staircase going back, we have this fluorescent light going back. These are vertical lines or angled vertical lines, okay? We have this other line going back, and then within this line there are broad horizontal lines for the shelves of the book and tiny books that are vertical lines going up and down. Look at how everything is jammed together, okay? Here on this side we have vertical lines, we have horizontal lines, we have squares, we have rectangles. Everything is all jammed in. That's his frustration. That's what that symbolizes, right? The frustration of mediocrity that is Eli Cash, that the Tenenbaums may be failures, but they were geniuses. That's what Royal says to Margot, right? You used to be a genius. What happened, right? And Eli's always on the outside looking in. Think of that image when Eli is introduced when he's a little boy. He's looking out through the window, right? He has his face pressed against the glass. He's always on the outside, dreaming about this family of geniuses on the inside. He's trying to replicate that as an adult. He has his own stupid costume, right? They have their costumes. He has his own stupid costume. He's trying to copy, replicate the family, repetition, trauma, right? He's trying to replicate it and be as if he could almost be a Tenenbaum, but he's not. And maybe the fact that he can't be a Tenenbaum is what eventually makes him a Tenenbaum, right? The frustration and the failure is the closest that he'll get to actually being a Tenenbaum. We see that demonstrated in the architectural elements, okay? Here are more examples. I know I already showed you guys this still, but again, this is an example of variety, contrast, and opposition, that this half of the room is opposing this half of the room. We have such variety in the architectural elements that we see on screen. I've already talked about this one. This is another one. This is a great one, okay? So Royal and Ethel seeing each other for the first time in years. Look at how stunned. Right? Look at how stunned Ethel is, right? She's running into Royal on the street for the first time in years, okay? And look at how the shock of their meeting is captured in the architectural elements, okay? Now, again, you guys can be like, oh my God, will this lady shut up? Why is she analyzing this so deeply? Maybe Wes Anderson didn't intend for this, right? But again, looking at the level of design, the meticulousness of his design, I hardly believe that Wes Anderson would be a dumbass when it comes to understanding the symbolic significance of contrasting lines, right? Of oppositional lines. I hardly think that he wouldn't be able to recognize that, right? So here we have these two characters standing in opposition in a moment in which they are opposing each other emotionally, relationally, right? They are opposite of each other. Ethel is everything that is quote unquote good. Royal is everything that is bad. They are like two enemies sizing each other up, although Ethel is caught off guard, right? The architectural elements are also in conflict. It's not a coincidence that there are bars on the window like a prison cell, right? That suddenly Ethel is trapped. She's literally trapped like in a prison by running into this man, running into this, not quite ex-husband who will never leave her alone. I love the hair. These white streaks of hair in her head, they look like streaks of lightning, right? Like she's just been struck by this thunderbolt. She's so shocked by this, benign demon who's like come back into her life. Look at that red tie, right? Dressed almost like the devil who's come back into her life, okay? Now moving on to the concept of the use of lines and the sense of movement. So sometimes lines can also be used in a sense of harmony in two-dimensional design, but I would say that in Wes Anderson's films, he often uses lines like the lines of these thickets here, or the lines of the railing of the porch, or even the lines of the windows of the house, that Wes Anderson often uses lines as a way to guide expectation and to guide the eyes, right? Of pointing us to where we need to be paying attention, of what we should be looking at. This is a great still as an example of this. So here's Chaz. Chaz is fighting. I mean, I don't know how they're playing with a BB gun, but Chaz is aiming his BB gun at Richie, his brother, and Richie's teammate, quote unquote, Eli, right? Richie and Eli are on one team, and Chaz and the dad are on another team, okay? And so Chaz doesn't, he knows what his target is. He's focused on that. He doesn't think that there's any other threat. But the lines in the image tell us something else. Look, they're all pointing upwards. We can think of these as 100 fingers pointing up, 1,000 fingers of warning pointing up, saying, Chaz, look up, look up, look up. Because remember what's in the background, what we can't see in this image? It's the dad, it's Royal waiting to shoot Chaz in the back, right? To stab him in the back, to betray him. The lines tell us to be aware, even though Chaz doesn't have the benefit of understanding that, right? Let's look at, I'm going to skip over this one. Let's look at another example. This is a great example, okay? So here we have poor dumb Raleigh, right? Margot's husband, who has no idea that his wife is like straight up leaving him, even though he's a psychologist and he should have this kind of astute understanding. He's so clueless in his pointless research. Here he is carrying all her baggage, Think of the symbolism of baggage, right? He's carrying her baggage, her emotional burdens, her emotional shit. He's carrying it, okay? She's in this phone booth. It's like they're in this open street, and even in this open street, she doesn't want to stand next to him, right? She has all this space to be separate from him, but even in this open space, she has to find this little tiny cube, this little tiny closet she can be in so she can be safe from this, oppressively boring husband that she has, okay? Let's look at the lines on the street. Okay, we have the lines, the vertical lines here of the phone booth, right? We have the lines of the road and the sidewalk. We have the lines here of the buildings, okay? They're all leading the eye to look somewhere in the background, okay? Somewhere behind her, behind Margot, down the street. What is it saying? Margot's already gone. Margot's gone. She's already down the street. Raleigh doesn't know. Poor stupid Raleigh doesn't know. Everyone else knows. Even the street knows. Even the buildings know before Raleigh that Margot is gone and she's never coming back. She's gone for good. She's gone like that never-ending street all the way, all the way, all the way down. That's where she is, as far away as possible from Raleigh. Pattern is also sometimes used in composition and design. I'm not really going to say so much about the pattern. I'm just going to point them out. I'm sure there's endless analysis we can have of the pattern, but I'm not going to spend too much time about it. Here we have this use of, what would this be? I guess like a chevron pattern. Scale is also another conscious manipulation of design elements when thinking about composition of things that are large, things that are small, things that contrast each other. If it weren't for the pencil and the finger, we would sort of have no way of knowing just exactly how big this kind of diorama set is, right? We wouldn't exactly know, but these elements are here to remind us of scale. We have the books here, we have the pencil here, and the finger to remind us that this is a child's world. This is a child's like presentation or representation of the adult world, okay? And what's in this child representation of the adult world? 3 figures, 3 lonely figures that are a little less lonely because they're together, okay? So even though this is kind of a play on scale, it's representing something very important, which is the big world, the world of big things, of adults, looking back with longing on the little things, the world of childhood, when the children were at least together. That's what happens in this film. All the family members are separated, and then they come back together, right? What's that line from Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York, that when I join these fingers, they become a fist, right? That's a line that's said in Gangs of New York. Excellent movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. The family members divided are weakened, but when they come back together, they're like a fist, right? And here we see it, this longing for the past. What was so special about the past? The 3 kids were together. The siblings were together. They didn't have conflict at that time, okay? Here we have another example of scale. We see here that these little tiny things, the mice, in contrast to these bigger elements, the curtains of the theater, I guess we can think of it as. I'll stop right here.